Alright, so this is just going to very quickly go over the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotic cells. Just to review command terms, there are two, compare and distinguish, that are kind of similar, but when we often think of the word compare, we use that in our regular language, and when you see that on other school assignments, really we use it as compare and contrast. And so compare here really, in that sense, means how are they similar. But IB really means, when they say compare, they mean compare and contrast. So they're looking for similarities and differences. Okay? Whereas when they say the word distinguish, they're only looking for differences. So what you really need to do is make sure you commit both of these to memory, so you know the information to give to IB when they ask for it. So what we're going to do is, as best as I can, draw a straight line across, and on one side we're going to write things with prokaryotic cells, and on the other eukaryotic cells. Oh, that's terrible. Let me redo that. That's workable. Okay, so we know that for prokaryotic cells, that DNA is circular, so sometimes it's described as DNA is in a ring without protein. So there's no protein around the DNA, or the DNA is wrapped around, whereas that is the case for eukaryotes. So this would be a difference, right? So this is DNA with proteins as chromosomes. Now, if we remember the video about chromosomes and winding up, this is the video about cell cycle. I talked a little bit about how DNA wraps itself around histone proteins to make nucleosomes. That's the case for eukaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells alone. But sometimes that DNA is not wrapped around chromosomes, like when it's in interphase, and in that case, it's in the form of chromatin. Okay, so that's one difference. Another difference is that DNA is free in the cytoplasm. Now, when we say free, it means it's not bound in a membrane, whereas in eukaryotic cells, the DNA is enclosed inside of the nuclear envelope, which really means that it's stuck inside of a nucleus or a container. Now, that's another difference. Yet another difference is that prokaryotic cells have no mitochondrion, whereas eukaryotic cells do have a mitochondrion. And so something to think about with this is, if you think back to our second unit, the one after statistics, when we're talking about classification, we learned about some prokaryotic kingdoms, like eubacteria and archaeobacteria, but the eukaryotic kingdoms include the protists, the fungi, the plants, and the animals. And all of those four eukaryotic kingdoms, again, the protists, the fungi, the plants, and the animals, all have mitochondria. And they all have mitochondria, so that means they can do aerobic respiration, they're efficient in making more ATP. Alright, prokaryotic cells have 70S ribosomes, whereas eukaryotic cells have 80S. There is no internal compartmentalization. To form organelles, whereas in eukaryotic cells there is internal compartmentalization. And the examples of these organelles are like the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi apparatus. So it's there to form many types of organelles. All right. And yet another difference is that prokaryotic cells are less than 10 micrometers, and these bad boys are bigger than 10 micrometers. Now, those are all differences. So I'm going to talk about some similarities, because remember, compare talks about mentioned similarities and differences. They both have plasma membranes. And notice that this is just an IV trick. If we write it as a chart, it helps us make sure that we get all the points we need. For every difference, so simply saying prokaryotic cells have DNA in a ring without protein would not get you any points. What you need to say for IV's rubrics is to say that prokaryotic cells have DNA in a ring without proteins, whereas eukaryotic cells have DNA with proteins as chromosomes or chromatin. And if you write it like this, in a chart form, point by point, comparing prokaryotes and eukaryotes, you get a check mark every time. So if we say that prokaryotic cells have plasma membranes and eukaryotic cells have plasma membranes, then we get a check mark, or you get a check mark. That prokaryotic cells they carry out all the functions of it's my abbreviation for functions. All the functions of life. These guys also carry out all the functions of life. These have DNA. These have DNA. And these are points that IB will give you credit for, but some other things to just kind of stretch your brain a little bit. These guys have ribosomes. So do these. Another obvious one would be cytoplasm. Cytoplasm. And these are the things that are true for all prokaryotes and all eukaryotes. Because some prokaryotes have flagella, not all. Some eukaryotic cells have flagella, but not all. So these are things that hold true in all situations, comparing prokaryotes to eukaryotes.